marking the International Day of Reflection on the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. Thank you also to our co-organizers, the Survivors Association, Ibuka, Sweden, and the Embassy of Rwanda here in Stockholm, led by the esteemed Madam Ambassador Dr. Diane Gasumba. Thank you for your Deputy Speaker, and I acknowledge the presence, your presence, and the work that you do, and we are very happy that you took time in your busy schedule to be one of the keynote speakers during this ceremony. The United Nations designated 7th of April today as the International Day of Reflection on the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda, and this is why we are here today, to remember, to reflect, and to renew our commitment. As Rwanda and the rest of the world commemorate this 28th anniversary of the genocide, I would like to start this remembrance ceremony by calling on you all to stand up as we observe a minute of silence in memory of the over 1 million lives, men, women, and children whose lives were taken in just 100 days in Rwanda in 1994. So today we remember and pay respect to those who unduly suffered and died as a result of this brutal and tragic, hateful act of genocide. We must never stop remembering. We must always remember. We must remember and honor the mothers who were taken away from their families, all the fathers, the sons, the daughters, whose lives were brutally stolen from their loved ones, the friends and the relatives who were murdered just because they belonged to the wrong tribe, because of their ethnicity, simply because of hate. We remember and we mourn you. For the survivors in Rwanda and in the diaspora and in this room, we share your pain. We pay our deepest respect to you. We promise you our renewed and unwavering commitment to always remember by passing on your story to every generation, and most importantly to those who were not born when the genocide occurred, because it will be up to them not to repeat the failures of the generation before them. Ladies and gentlemen, today we have a program that includes testimonies from survivors, keynote speeches from our Honorable Deputy Speaker of the Swedish Parliament, and Her Excellency Dr. Diane Gasumba, the Ambassador of Rwanda to Sweden. We also have 4 distinguished panelists that will share with us their perspectives. Rwanda, the country that was reborn by Bjorn Sunderby, who shares her experiences from the genocide.
Was discriminated in their own country. They have been discriminated many years in many ways. I experienced this when I joined high school as a young teenager girl. In boarding school, I have been harassed in many ways by both teachers and students. I was studying in Bugesera area where lived many Tutsis. It's not far from Kigali. I saw many people dying before genocide, back 1992, 93, in that area of Bugesera where I was a student. The people were imprisoned in their own homes. They were lit on before they lit on the fire. Yet somehow we were somewhat naive and trusted the international community. We trusted United Nations peacekeepers who were in Rwanda. We trusted the Arusha Peace Agreement. We trusted diplomats, humanitarian agencies, and of course Western countries. We thought they were going to put pressure on the killing regime to stop killing people and stop planning mass killing of Tutsi. On April 6, when the plane carrying the president was shot down, I was home. It was evening. We were enjoying our evening as usual, telling stories. And the next day, we had the Hutu in neighborhood start chasing Tutsi's neighbors to kill them. and we ran to the churches to seek for a safe place, thinking it was a safe place. On April 7th, we gathered at church as refugees who were lucky to get there. And after a short period of 3 days there as refugees, in militias at our neighborhood, they came to kill us. They attacked the church and the buildings surrounded the churches. They killed the whole day from morning till sunset. They were a big hall full of children, full of old people, pregnant women. They just burned that big hall. We ran. Few of who were lucky to survive on that day. It was April 10th, 1994. We ran to the forest, far away from the human being, far away from all those neighbors who were searching, killing everyone, young, old, women, children, and we end up in the forest. Some died on the run, but I was one of the lucky ones who were met and liberated by Rwanda Patriotic Army, RPF. My parents, cousins, and extended family, friends, neighbors could not survive alone. With many Tutsis in my village, many families were wiped out. We couldn't bury many of them in dignity. This was common in different areas of Rwanda. My fellow survivors, 28 years in natural of life, many seems to be a long time. 28 years of pain, of suffering, of nightmares, of loneliness. 28 years of searching for the bodies of our loved ones seem insignificant. Why? Because everything appears to be the same when pain so embedded in you. Day and night don't mean much. Weeks, months, years are all the same. In fact, time can only be meaningful when you have something exciting to look forward to. Our wounds will never heal. Our memories will never go away. Our loved ones will never be forgotten. Our pain is here, and it is here to stay for a long time. We need to recognize that part of us died. There is peace that is missing in our lives. But there are people, including the leaders of our country, Rwanda, who have been there for us to hold our hands, to help to climb up from that deep pit and reach out to the surface again. There is also those people who are determined to devictimize us, those who constantly add insult to our injuries. Please do not give them another chance to hurt you. Always remember, inner peace comes from within. Our inner peace will never be delivered to us. One of the reasons why we survived, I believe, is to live a good life, a successful life. And those who couldn't make it will live through us, and shall be continue to remember them. 28 years later, we remember them, and we promise ourselves to not forget our past so that history can never repeat itself. Let me conclude this quote from Professor Elie Wiesel, a Nobel Prize winner and a Holocaust survivor. I quote, "I decided to devote my life to telling the story because I felt that having survived, I owe something to the dead, and anyone who does not remember betrays them again. End of quote. I thank you all.
For sharing with us your testimony. We honor you, we share your pain, and we shall make sure that your testimony will be preserved and passed on to the next generation. So thank you for sharing.
For your wonderful words. Madam Ambassador, Your Excellencies, Member of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen. As you heard, my name is Lotta Jonsson Fornarve, and I'm the second Deputy Speaker of the Riksdag, the Swedish Parliament. First of all, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to address on behalf of the Parliament you at such a solemn and important occasion as this commemoration ceremony in the Swedish Parliament. I would also like to thank José Botera for your strong and very touching testimony of the cruelties and how your life has been affected by this experience. It goes beyond what anyone could imagine, less lived through. Yet you did just that. You lived, and you stand here today to tell us about what's happened. It's an important task to do so, passing these messages on to coming generation, working to prevent something like this to unfold again. Yet it is an important task to do so, letting your voice be heard on behalf of all of the victims of the genocide, remembering and honoring them, not because they died, but because they lived. Every one of them unique and available, every one of them filled with joy, with sorrow, worrying about their homework, loving football, caring for their elderly parents, going about the business of everyday life, that precise life that they have not lived in vain. There is a purpose to every life. We remember them, we honor them. The horror and the suffering inflicted on human beings as well as your country during the genocide that took place in 1994 will forever stand out as one of the darkest times in history. The weeks when around 1 million people were killed unfold so rapidly in one sense, but in another they will never disappear. The memory will forever be a scar in the history of mankind. We must do our utmost to ensure that this never happen again. Also, we can never forget that also the perpetrators were humans, also the perpetrators will live on among us. We must never forget that the mechanisms to change people, to change history are still here. Humanity is not immune. We must understand those mechanisms in order to prevent them to take over with hatred and division once again. This is the responsibility of each and every one of us. Only by facing our history head on can we shape our future. I would like to quote a few words of the Swedish Nobel laureate Harry Martinson in his epic poem Aniara. There is a protection from near everything, from the fire and damage by storm and frost, or add whichever blows may come to mind. But there is no protection from mankind. No, there is no such protection if we do not provide it ourselves. What we do, each and every one of us, matters. Kindness, love, awareness, humanity and dignity, it matters. Every single act of friendship, of solidarity, of standing up for those values matters. Every act of good forms a part of the skill that can protect us from evil. Thank you once again for organizing this beautiful ceremony in order to let us share this moment together, remember together, and to learn more. I would also like to mention the exhibition that will be on display in the Parliament until April 13, a part of remembering and sharing knowledge about what happened. Madam Ambassador, Your Excellencies, Member of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen. Rwanda has walked a long path since 1994 towards a brighter future, and you have shown the world what is possible to achieve if you unite, if you work hard, if you reconcile. You have shown us that. Thank you so much for that. I'm also happy to say that I will have the opportunity to visit your beautiful country. In August 1st, Deputy Speaker and myself will participate in the Women Political Leader Global Forum in Kigali. I believe events like this is a fine example of how we can work towards understanding, inclusiveness, equality, and human rights. Together, it can be done. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, for those kind words, thoughtful words. And we also thank you for your unwavering commitment to issues concerning the African continent, human rights and the rule of law. Honorable Deputy Speaker, Your Excellencies, Ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, our next keynote speaker is amongst the most distinguished people that I personally have ever met. She's an inspiring person, and her unwavering commitment and energy is beyond the ordinary.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, Honorable Members of Parliament, Excellencies, Heads of Missions, Representatives of international organizations, members of the Rwandan community, dear friends of Rwanda, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the government of Rwanda and the people of Rwanda, let me start by thanking all of you for gathering here today to commemorate for the 28th time the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. We are deeply humbled by your presence. I would like to thank Honorable Mamadou Malcolm Jallow for hosting us at the Swedish Parliament, and Josine Kanamugire, President of Ibuka Sweden, the Association of Survivors, for co-hosting this important event. Today, at the time when genocide denial is on the rise, we are here to remember. We remember the more than 1 million lives that were lost in Rwanda, including babies and pregnant women. We remember our beloved ones, and every day we think about those we couldn't bury, and this makes life harder. They took away millions of lives. They took away our family names, our joy. But when we were about to reach the bottom of the bottom, when we were about to sink to the lowest and darkest place, the sun began to rise and the lightness came back into our lives. This was after 100 days of atrocities. It was on the 4th of July, 1994, when our country was liberated by the Rwanda Patriotic Front. We healed and got to realize that something remained. Our dignity remained, Rwanda remained, our patriotism remained. This day reminds us to never ever forget our history. This day reminds us of what hate speeches have led us to. Today reminds us of what discrimination has led us to. We stand in solidarity with survivors and unite to ensure that it will never happen again, in Rwanda or anywhere else. It happened once in Rwanda, therefore it can happen again. It can happen everywhere. It is also an opportunity for us as Rwandans to share our history, our story of reconciliation and nation building, with the rest of the world so that it never happens again. As we remember, we also invite the rest of the world to pause and share in this act of remembrance and to learn from our tragic experience in the hope that our horrors do not befall others, certainly not on our watch and not through our collective inaction or indifference. This is our call to the global community to stand together against the genocide. Excellencies, honorables, ladies and gentlemen, equally as we remember, we focus on the imperative of unity and reconciliation because it is a time also to reflect on the journey Rwanda has traveled since 1994, particularly to demonstrate that out of the desolation of genocide has risen a spirit of unity that allowed the rebirth of a new Rwanda, united and reconciled. In the past 20 years, Rwandans have given and continue to give their best in rebuilding our country. The progress is clear to all and the achievement continue. Many wonder what our secret is. It is simply good political leadership, patriotism, sacrifice, resilience, and hard work, but most importantly, choosing to stay together and work together and build a country free of discrimination for the best of our children and future generations. I urge Rwandans here today to stay committed and continue rebuilding this new nation defined by forgiveness, peace, and reconciliation. Today, Rwanda is known as the fast developing, beautiful land of thousand hills. Today, Rwandan leadership has discarded all ethnic labels. We are only Rwandan. Indeed, we are a family. We owe the rebirth of Rwanda to those countless lives that were lost and to the survivors who still bear the indelible scars, both invisible and invisible. We owe the rebirth of Rwanda to the RPF Inkotanyi that has stopped the genocide against the Tutsi and to everyone who continued the RPF core vision. While many people marvel at the miracle of rebirth seen in the country, some work day and night to distort the effect. Some chose to close their eyes and doubt it, and others anticipate our demise. To these people, we dare to say, never again. Never again will the history of genocide be repeated in Rwanda. Never again we will allow our people to be divided based on their ethnicity or any other difference. Like I said earlier, Rwanda's history should be a lesson, and I pledge that we all stand together in fighting genocide ideology. We have to fight it because it is still alive. Those who took part in genocide and their sympathizers continue to deny the truth about it. The reality is that genocide is a result of those ideologies. Denial of the genocide that happened in Rwanda ultimately is a continuation of genocide itself. And this, my country will relentlessly continue to fight. I would like to thank the government of Sweden for pursuing justice and holding perpetrators of the genocide against the Tutsi accountable for the crimes they committed. There should be no heaven for genociders. Let me close by giving my heartfelt thanks to José Butera for her courage to share with us her powerful testimony and to speak of such painful memories. It is hard to comprehend that her story is one of hundreds of thousands of such stories of survivors. And once again, thank you, Honorable Jallo, for your tireless efforts that have led to this commemoration event being hosted for the first time ever in the Swedish Parliament. Thank you very much. The Swedish parliament premises is more than a room to us. It is a noble place where laws protecting Swedes and preventing world atrocities, including genocides and its denials, are voted. These moments bring to our mind the failure of the Rwandan parliament before 1994 that have discriminatory laws and have led to the genocide against the Tutsi. Our presence here takes us back home, where the actual parliament has revised all these discriminatory laws and keeps the protection of all Rwandans at the core of their daily work. Thank you, Madam Vice Speaker. I thank you all for your kind attention, and I'm now honored to light this candle on behalf of all of us. It's our humble way of paying tribute to over 1 million lives lost during the genocide. This candle is a symbol of all continued remembrance, and this light shines bright. May their memories live on within us forever. Thank you.
Rwanda rushya nganzo ngari mugongo mugari uduhetse imbaga ese waramutse iri hobe nkutwiri gutaye ku mutima inkovu bitse imbere n'inyuma nizikubuze gucya ku maso impore mawe Rwanda mama kandi Rwanda papa.
Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador, Your Excellency, for those powerful words. We thank you for your strong commitment to preserve the memory, to help us remember, to honor, to reflect, and to learn. Excellencies, honorable members of parliament, ladies and gentlemen, now we are going into the second part of this program. We have our distinguished panelists that are going to share their perspective, including on discrimination and genocide denial, fighting impunity and access to justice, and perspectives of survivors. They'll have about 5 minutes introductory remarks, and after their presentation, I will have an initial round of questions for each panelist, and hopefully we'll have time for you, ladies and gentlemen, to also ask questions. Let me start by introducing our first panelist and co-organizer, Ms. Josine Kanamugire, who represents the Association of Genocide Survivors, Ibuka, Sweden, since the start of the association in January 2022. Ms. Josine Kanamugire represents the Association of Genocide Survivors, as I mentioned, and is a survivor of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. She witnessed the genocide at a young age, and she lost almost everyone during the genocide. Since 2017, Ms. Josine Kanamugire has been working at the Swedish International Development Corporation Agency, SIDA, as a program administrator. Before joining SIDA, she worked for different aid organizations and companies as a project financial officer. So we're very happy to have you here. Please help me in welcoming her on stage.
Thank you, Honorable Jallo. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Yeah, I am a survivor of 1994 genocide. I was 15 years old. And I'm not going to speak to let you listen to my testimony, but I want to talk about the technology of genocide and the psychological effects of the trauma the survivors face after the genocide. When we hear that they killed us, they did, who they are those people? What they did use? Yeah, they had people as the first weapon. They mobilized those people in such short time. And those people were neighbors, they are members of parents, they are doctors, they are teachers, they are children, and okay, thank you, yeah. They are nurses, they are prestes, they are in every category of society. They used traditional weapons, day-to-day domestic tools, like hammers, machetes, and knives. And there was one particular weapon that they used. That was a special one. That's called Namongano Yunganzi. And that make Tutsi already dead before dead. I don't know if you get that, but they had that power. And that make it difficult for anyone who was even trying to hide the Tutsi. It was impossible because you knew what you were going to get. When I talk about weapons used, you didn't hear any of other. No Tutsi was killed, was shot. Very few who had money, they bought a shot. It was a privilege to be shot. The best way a Tutsi could die was to be shot. The second part I'm going to talk about is the psychology effects, the trauma survivors face. There are so many, each and every survivor could speak, but I would go through some. Okay. Yeah. There was the necessity to move on with life, which was a beautiful thing. We all want to leave that behind us. We want to sleep in houses, we want to eat, we want to go to school, we want to get back our lives. But we didn't take time to reflect, to mourn. The war didn't stop, and we didn't either. So we moved on in new lives with our burden. That burden became heavier and heavier. The fragile family configuration. The Rwandans are family-oriented as you are, as Swedish are. But so many people were killed, their family couldn't have the same structure as they used to have. So the young children took over. They became the head of families, and at a very young age, widows became the head of families, and young orphans moved to the extended family. Those families had their own traumas. So it became a new way of living, and we adjusted for it. This dislocation. Remember, we didn't just lose our people. We lost also our homes, our identity. We had to move to other places to start a new life. And a part of us, a part of our identity, went with our loved ones. The shame. There is a shame of surviving. We feel shame how our lives didn't matter, didn't have any value. I can ask you to show the next picture, please. While waiting, I can say that we didn't, the life of Tutsi didn't have a meaning. We couldn't decide anything. We were so powerless, and those people had overpowered us. I don't even have words to describe. I lived in that place. That's a camp called Nyarushishi, zone turquoise, it's well known. The survivors always tell me, wow, 5-hotel lifestyle during the genocide. That was how low the bar was. That was what we wished for ourselves and ours, one of those. You heard Mukakarisa say that, I wish they raped Charlotte. We wished so low things that we are ashamed, we feel still dirty that we went through all those. And there is a blame. We blame ourselves and we blame those who left us. There is what if. What if I took my young sister with me? What if my parent made a decision to leave the country or to hide or to do so and so? The lack of closure. We haven't yet seen our loved ones killed. We wish we have seen that in some cases. And we haven't buried the bodies of our loved ones. It's so much difficult to know what you don't want to know when you don't have facts. We wish that we could see their bodies, we can bury them, we can make an end to that. Talking about the traumas, I know I have not so much time left, but let me talk my own trauma that I can share with you. As I told you, I was 15 years old during the genocide. And in my case, the manifestation of the psychological damage was in the form of the time it took me to realize that I'm two people coexisting in one. A 15 years old child and a grown-up woman on whatever age of thinking maturity I have reached. This realization was vital because it helped me to make sense of the cognitivity dissonance I have always felt as an adult. I am a survivor of genocide of 1994, but I always felt that my understanding of my own experience, my ability to explain to others what actually happened, and how it affected me, this understanding was so limited, as if it was a stranger trying to relate another person's experience. Then it hit me. In all those other aspects of my life as an adult, but when it comes to genocide, I'm still a 15 years old, young, a teenager daughter, a girl that's living through an experience of that differs understanding. I'm closing, but let me tell you one thing. I painted a very dark side of our trauma, but we are not just survivors. We have our resilience, and we are happy human beings who can love, be loved, laugh, work, and be here talking to you on this very day. We have our up and down, but we go up again. For that, I'm very grateful that I'm here today, and I thank you all. Thank you.
So well-known Swede, Lars Renius. Lars Renius has been serving as the Equality Ombudsman currently since 2020. Prior to this, he held the position as Secretary General of the organization Läkare Missionen. Between 2006 and 2012, he was also Sweden's first ombudsman for children and students at the Swedish Schools Inspectorate. He also has several years' experience working as a lawyer involved in asylum law, custody, and criminal cases. But also, something that I did not know, Lars Renius spent much of his childhood in Rwanda, where his parents were missionaries. and witnessed the ethnic discrimination against the Tutsi that later resulted in the genocide. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you to Josin and Jose for sharing your memories and with us, and your feelings and your thoughts about the genocide. Let me also start by thanking the organizers for arranging this and inviting me to this commemoration of the 1994 years genocide in Rwanda against the Tutsi. It gives us all the possibility to send our thoughts to the victims, to their families, but also to reflect about our responsibility to prevent a recurrence in the future of the genocide. For me personally, this day of remembrance has a special meaning. As Jallo mentioned here, I was brought up in Rwanda, and I'm well aware what happened during the 100 days of killings in '94. Among the murdered were close friends from my childhood. The genocide in Rwanda is usually described as one of the most brutal genocides and one of the most well-planned because it was committed during such a short period of time. In 3 months, almost 1 million people were killed by machetes and other weapons. But even if the genocide was carried out over a short period of time, it is important to remember that the genocide could not have been carried out without being preceded by a long period in which the Tutsi group was subjected to discrimination. The propaganda and the situation became more severe for each day until it reached a point where Tutsis were totally dehumanized. All human beings are born free and equal in value and rights. This is the key message in the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Protection against discrimination is a prerequisite for realizing human rights in practice. And the prohibition of discrimination is specifically stated in the various instruments of the international system for the protection of human rights. National laws and authorities should ensure that the fundamental rights and principles in international law become reality. As the Ombudsman, it is my task to combat discrimination and promote equal rights and opportunities in Sweden. Since I took up office as the Ombudsman in Sweden, I have seen and dealt with several examples of serious discrimination in the Swedish society and how individuals are affected by it. Discrimination is not only devastating for the individual who has been discriminated against, it's also for the whole society. It's devastating for the whole society. For these reasons, society should not accept, allow, or tolerate discrimination. I believe that securing redress for those who are discriminated against does not only support the individual, but also influence structures in the organizations and in the society. In Sweden and all over Europe, there are forces and discussions that are advocating for values that are the opposite of the principle of the equal value of all people. And I do not think we fully understand what harm and the consequences this may have and could open up to in our society. Sadly, there are too many examples in history of where this can lead. It often starts with a fear of something that seems different, then rumors start and they spread easily. This turns into prejudice that eventually turns into truth. People are and groups are suspicious towards each other. Words get louder, the tone is raised. And there are many, many examples of when this ends in extremely tragic events with the gravest consequences. I know this escalation and the type of mechanism development very well from my own childhood in Rwanda. The 1948 United Nations Genocide Convention did not prevent the genocide in Rwanda in 1994, but the first judgment under the convention came at an international tribunal, Rwandan tribunal, in 1998. Genocide is considered one of the most heinous crimes of concern to the international community, and all countries therefore have an obligation to prosecute this crime. And Sweden has prosecuted and convicted 3 persons for the genocide in Rwanda. All were sentenced. The word was passive, despite us having information about what was happening and opportunities to intervene, both in terms of preventing it from happening and putting an end to it once it had begun. We all owe it to the victims of the genocide, to remember and to act against the perpetrators. But also, I think it's important to pay attention to the attitudes and the public climate in society, and be sure to take responsibility, take actions to prevent it from happening again. Thank you.
Researcher and scholar Tom Dahiro is a Rwandan journalist, researcher and scholar who specializes in understanding bigotry, especially in genocide ideology and genocide denial. Much of his work is based on primary research using his knowledge of Rwandan society, culture, and history. He was Rwanda's Human Rights Commissioner in charge of civil rights, civil and political rights, a post he held for 7 years. For over 20 years, runs a private documentation archives center, which helps many researchers doing research in the field of genocide and violent extremism in the Great Lakes region of Africa.
Thank you very much, Jalal. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us. Today, I'm not going to speak as a scholar, but as a survivor and a witness to the genocide. Because on this day, in 1994, I was in the capital, Kigali, and for 100 days I was in Rwanda. I witnessed a lot. I suffered a lot. Today briefly I'm going to talk about fighting genocide denial. And there are two aspects that I want to share with you. If we want to fight genocide denial, we have to understand the genocide denial, what it is, and how it can affect us as humanity and survivors in particular. Genocide denial comes in many forms, but I'll just mention a few. Relativization, justification, plain denial, whitewashing, equalization, blame shifting, and finally, sanitizing the perpetrators. In order to understand what I mean, I want to share with you a quotation without breaking it down. I'll mention this quote is from who at the end of the reading. And you'll understand what it means to deny genocide. Open quote. The plane was brought down. Within 2 hours, the RPF had been activated. People defended themselves. The population resisted. There was a societal breakdown. It was a war for political power. Excesses were committed on all sides. The government did not know what to do. Here, when he talks about the government, it's the government that was committing the genocide. Did not know what to do. It tried to maintain some semblance of power. The theory that the government planned the genocide is illogical. The government was weak. It had no interest in shooting down the plane. There is no proof of a plan. The so-called genocide is an excuse to keep the RPF in power. There were mass killings on both sides. I do not think that the government committed crimes against humanity, but the RPF did. It is not easy to accept the genocide theory. Why did the United Nations and the United States withdraw? Because they wanted the RPF to take power. End of quote. When you read through this text, when I said one of the typologies of denial is the relativization, to relativize a crime like the genocide. Here you find there was just a societal, there was no crime, but a societal breakdown. Justification. The government was trying to maintain the semblance of power, and because the plane was brought down. Plain denial. There was no crime, but people resisted. And the people defended themselves. So the genocide becomes a people's resistance rather than perpetration of a crime. When you have the genocide is plainly denied, when he says they're so-called, in English, when they're so-called genocide. What the testimonies we have just listened to, we saw, Ambassador, what happened to her because of the emotions. And for that person who is a denier, it's the so-called genocide. It was sort of some sort of soap opera on those who are talking about it and those who have come here to share the grief with us are just pretending because it's a so-called genocide. There was no genocide. Whitewashing. Oh, there was no plan. There was nothing like that. It's just exaggeration. There were atrocities on both sides. Atrocities on both sides. You'd hear sometimes they talk about the double genocide theory. Equalization, blame shifting. The government did not commit crimes against humanity, but the RPF did. So you have a perpetrator becoming an innocent person. In brief, this is what the genocidaires do. It all started in 1994 when the perpetrators, if you read my book, The Friends of Evil, you'd find what it means for the genocidaires to plan and even publish some sort of a blueprint of the denial, and this denial went from the perpetrators themselves and now entered the mainstream. Initially it was through their press releases and through academics and through the media, but now it's in the social media. This quotation is not from a genocidaire, a Rwandan. It's from a Canadian lawyer. His name is John Philpott. So don't think that the one who said this is a stupid guy or a plain nincompoop. He's just a learned fellow who knows law, who knows that he does. This is an intention to kill the truth. And the reason why we are here today to talk about the fighting genocide denial is because a genocide denied is a genocide repeated. If we had adhered to the principles that were set in 1948, the genocide against the Tutsi wouldn't have happened in 1994. And it wouldn't have happened in 1964. Because the word extermination, the genocide against the Tutsi did not come in 1994. It first appeared in 1964. Then, what do we do today? With my short time I have, I'm just making an appeal to this honorable parliament and to other parliaments worldwide that when we got the Genocide Convention in 1948, it talked about two aspects: genocide prevention and genocide punishment. After September 11, 2001, the world decided to take different measures to prevent the terrorism from happening again. If we want to prevent the genocide again, we should fight and prevent denial from spreading. And this is my appeal today. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Jallo. Madame the Ambassador, Excellencies, Honorable, ladies and gentlemen, this important subject on this special day. In 1997, Judge Antonio Cassese, one of the pioneers of international justice, said before the United Nations General Assembly these words: "Victims have the fundamental right to see the persecutors brought to justice. It is an enterprise that aims to tame the savage bottom of human and to take life and to make life on earth better." These words remain relevant. A society that does not punish its so-called political crimes cannot be capable of breaking out of the vicious cycle of carnage. In order to rebuild the Rwandan society, traumatized and devastated by this tragedy, justice was and is still the first condition for a hope of peace. Trying a mass crime is a huge challenge. Beyond the number of the people to be tried, there are countless difficulties to be overcome. The imperative of eradicating impunity means that each individual involved must be held accountable, from the hierarchical superior to the simple executor. The genocide is part of what is called crimes against humanity. This means that its perpetrators did not only mourn the Tutsi community that was targeted, but also the human community as a whole. It also means that, and I would like to insist on this point, that the human community must unite and cooperate to face the consequences of this crime. In the justice domain, more than in others, this cooperation of the international community is a sine qua non condition. Indeed, those who committed the genocide obviously did not wait for the justice. When the Rwanda Patriotic Army put an end to the genocide, those who committed it went into exile, taking with them, as human shields, a big part of the rest of the population. Some were able to take refuge in neighbor countries, and others managed to go far. Some arrived even near you in Western countries. Others could not flee and remain in Rwanda or were brought back to Rwanda. The perpetrators of the genocide and their accomplices thus dispersed throughout the world. Given this situation, 3 different platforms have been activated concurrently to judge the suspects. The first one is the domestic Rwandan courts. The Rwandan justice system had to be innovative for dealing with the genocide-related litigation, a challenge that no other country in the world has ever had to face. It was necessary to devise a form of justice that took into account the means available to the country and that could both punish and reconcile. This is how the Gacaca courts, which combine local traditions with a modern criminal legal system, were devised and set up. The Gacaca courts made it possible to hand down nearly 1.2 million judgments. These jurisdictions closed in 2012, and the relay has now been taken over by the ordinary justice system for the rare new cases that arise now. The second platform is the international justice. Indeed, in 1994, the United Nations created the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. This institution closed its doors in 2016 after having indicted 93 people and completed 82 cases, which led to 61 condemnations. This outcome is disappointing. When you remember that the works of ICTR lasted 25 years, and that this institution swallowed up to $2 billion of taxpayers' money. Another point is that this tribunal did not provide any status for the victims who were not able to take part in the proceedings. The justice was there carried out without the victims, which is a paradox. The third platform is the foreign national courts that judge genocide suspects under the principle of universal jurisdiction. Indeed, in the context of the fight against impunity for crime against humanity, several countries have passed laws that allow them to derogate from the principle of territoriality in order to try suspects who live in their national territories. As I have said, several perpetrators of the genocide, especially the most important ones, were able to flee abroad. The principle of universal jurisdiction had made it possible to try a certain number of them and thus render justice to the victims. It is within this framework that 11 countries, including Sweden, thank you for that, have tried for genocide people who were leaving their territory. Some of them had even managed to obtain the nationality of these countries. Today, the ball is in the court of the international community that you are part of. While most of those who participated in the genocide, who live in Rwanda, have been tried, many of those who were the leaders are still hiding in foreign countries. Some countries are beginning to make visible efforts. France, for example, has long been a safe haven for several officials of the regime that committed the genocide. To date, only 3 people have been definitively convicted. But today, things are changing. Efforts have been made to track down and bring to justice those suspected of being involved. Currently, more than 25 cases are pending before the French courts, and it is expected that starting this year, there will be 2 trials per year. France has also amended its law to fight against the denial of the genocide committed against the Tutsi. It has extended the legal provisions against Holocaust denial to other genocide punished by local or international courts. The French legislator was compelled to do so by French Constitutional Council, which ruled that the fact that citizens of Tutsi origin were not protected against the denial in the same way as citizens of Jewish origin are protected against the same fact was contrary to the principle of equality of citizens before the law. Even though we can rejoice that many countries are beginning to be aware of their duty to contribute to help bring justice for the victims, many efforts are still remain to be made. Justice is expensive, and some countries are still reluctant to spend money on this litigation that has not directly affected the population. This is a mistake, in my opinion. Recent news, what is happening in Ukraine nowadays, should allow us to realize that genocide and crime against humanity are not a monopoly of distant countries. It should allow us to realize that the lack of firmness of the international community toward the perpetrators of these crimes can have repercussions even here. Therefore, let's fight against impunity, not only to give justice to the victims, but also to protect ourselves for the future. Thank you for your attention.
Before I say what I expect, let me thank the Swedish government, the effort to condemn the genocide. You are doing well. I can ask you to keep doing that. We really appreciate that because that makes us safe. Living with them together, it extends the genocide. We feel that it has not ended as they are here and they can take over us. We can't feel safe. We can't feel safe when they are with us. And as a representative of Iwuka, Iwuka means remember. I can take this opportunity to ask to have a chance for a memorial place. That memorial place for us as survivors and for you, for everyone. For us, because we have our loved ones near us, but for you as a teaching place. We can show what happened, we can educate you, the youth, and everyone who needs to be educated, so the never again can be applied near us. Thank you.
Now it has been 20 years that genocide has been perpetrated. Those who committed genocide are becoming old. It is also the same for the victims. Now it's about time for us, all of us, legislator, social society, simple citizens, to make efforts so that these people be brought to justice. The effort has to be done now, not tomorrow. Tomorrow it will be too late. Let us bring in the discussion this debate. Of course, the justice is independent. That's what has been told to us all the time. But I can take again the example of France. When there is a will, there is always a way. When there's a political will, the justice can really do miracles. So let's take this debate in the discussion, then the justice will follow.
Thank you. Thank you. I will emphasize the importance of having national equality bodies. Often they are built in different ways. Sweden was one of the first countries in the world that established different ombudsmen, and also Rwanda has an ombudsman against discrimination. But the important thing about those equality bodies is that they are given resources, tools, mandate that are very clear. So they have the possibility to stand up both in this area to investigate complaints, but also to give support to the preventative work for those who are responsible to combat discrimination.
Richard, what can Sweden learn from France in order to make the negation a crime?
So I think I have understood that in this country also there is discussion about the repression of the denial of Holocaust. What I expect is that the victim of genocide will not gonna be forgotten. I think it's the same hate. It's the same hate. I hope that the legislator, when they will make law about this, because the denial of Holocaust is really a problem, but it's also the same for the denial of the genocide against the Tutsi and all the other genocide which has been punished, by national and international society. So I think what Sweden can do is just to do like what France have done, what Belgium have done, what Germany have done also, to repress, to take the law which punish the denial in the same way of all the genocide which are recognized because it's the same hate.
Her Excellency the Ambassador, Dr. Diane Gesumba, and her entire staff for the great work and cooperation that we've had. Thank you to all the speakers and panelists for taking your time to come here and share your perspectives. And thank you to all of you for honoring our invitation and for being here. It is very much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Rwanda rushya nganzo ngari mugongo mugari uduhetse imbaga ese waramutse iri hobe nkutwiri gutaye ku mutima nkovu bitse imbere n'inyuma nizikubuze gucya ku maso impore mawe.
Murakoze, nitwa Josine Kanamugire, mpagarariye Ibuka Sweden, turi muri parlement ya Sweden Stockholm, aho twaje kwibuka abacu bazize Genocide yakorewe Abatutsi mu 1994. Dusoje umuhango wo kwibuka wagenze neza. Murakoze.
Nakirira mu ruhame ntibisobanuye uwahoze kuba ntagihamuka, ntibisobanuye ko nabyibagiwe. Oya kandi mama, nize kubana n'ahahise hanjye ngo mbashe gutanga imbabazi no kweza uyu mutima, mbashe nkutegure n'inkuseruka bakumbona ishya mawe. Abawe wabuze turaha ku bwabo ngo twibutse yuko igiti cyera kitazima, ndi ikizima muri byo nta mugesha umurama, impore ndiho.
Babaye mama Rwanda, abawe bazize uko bavutse.